run at the World Marathon Majors. And which are they? Just the way they are planned on the calendar year. Tokyo is the first, then you go to Boston, there's London. That is what they call in Europe the spring marathons. Then you've got the autumn marathons, Berlin, Chicago, and New York. What happens then if you do run all the 6 marathons, even if it's over a span of 10 years, they give you something known as a 6-star medal. And the first 6-star medal to come to Kenya was not from an elite athlete, no disrespect to them, but it was from a person who's got a different job. He goes by the name of James Waliaula. He got his 6-star medal in Berlin in 2015. 2 hours, 49 minutes, 40 seconds was the time he clocked when he got his 6-star medal. And the second person to get that was Edna Kiplagat, and that was in Berlin on the 16th of September. Then in October, the third 6-star medal came to Kenya, and it was by Jackson Dagwa, 2 hours, 58 minutes, 8 seconds. That was the time, no, rather 2 hours, 42:28. Actually, 2:58:08 was Boston, which is quite commendable given the atrocious conditions they had to run in. And I've got the 2 gentlemen in studio. On the far left is the first Kenyan to get a 6-star medal from the World Marathon Majors, and he's got it around his neck. Welcome, James, to KBC Channel 1.
Thank you, Ahome. And glad to have you.
Yes, and Jackson Dego.
Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, I would like to start with you, James. You have a very interesting story as to how you got into running. You could start by telling us about that.
Well, pretty much I got into serious running in 2012 after thinking about how to keep fit. With our daily jobs, I'm employed and working from 8 to 5, and it was very difficult to keep on doing team sports. And I felt like running was a good way of just keeping fit and traveling. And that's how I got into running. You only need to have shoes and you can run pretty much anywhere. Yeah.
And one of the things is that, because I read through your profile, is that you wanted to shed off some weight. You could tell us about that story.
Oh, yes. So, yeah, with the lifestyle we have nowadays, I'd really gained a lot of weight. I was weighing about 115 kgs. And this was really having a lot of weight on me, literally. So I had to find a way to shed. I tried a lot of stuff. I went to the gym. I tried some dieting, but it was really difficult. But once I started lacing up, I saw the results quite quickly. Started just 5Ks, 10Ks, and eventually it became an addiction. Yeah, and here we are. Yeah.
Everyday run, and your day job, you could tell us about that?
Well, I'm working with an NGO, humanitarian organization. When I started running, I was working in Kenya, but currently I'm in Juba, in South Sudan, with a French organization doing humanitarian work. Yeah.
Jackson, how did you get into running? You're the latest addition to the 6-star club in the country.
Yeah, thank you very much, Wahome. I've been running for pretty much of my life, I would say that. But getting into serious running, like running in marathons, I would say is about 4 years ago when I really wanted to do a marathon. My very first marathon I didn't actually finish. I dropped out. That was Stanchart, I think 2012. And I resigned and I said, I'll be 21, I'll be half marathon for life. But come 2015, I joined a group of runners by the name Urban Swarers. And that is when I met James and several other people who have been running for quite some while. And I thought, well, I actually can be able to do a full marathon. And what happened is that I decided I'm not going to do a full marathon in Kenya because then I might just decide to drop out again and go home. So my first marathon was in Singapore. And that is where I did my first marathon. Obviously, I was not going to travel that far and not finish a marathon. So my first marathon, where I did a time of 3 hours 48, I was actually surprised. I surprised myself because I thought I really wanted to do a sub 4. And doing a 3:48 was something I really patted my back on that.
And Tell us about your training regimes for running, because I can, for example, Jackson, I can use some of your times. 3 hours 21, that's Berlin in 2016. In 2017, 3 hours 14 in Tokyo and 3:37 in London. And then 3:01 in New York in 2017. What's your training regime, your daily training regime? Because you don't train, like the likes of Jeffrey Kamoro, Eliud Kipchoge, or Wilson Kipsang, Edna Kiplagat, Vivian Cheruiyot. What's your regime?
When you sign up for majors, then you realize that there are some races that you cannot enter unless you have a good time for your age. Like, for example, in my case, for Boston, I needed to do a time of 3 hours 15 minutes, sub 3 hours 15 minutes. And that was an uphill task for myself. But then I was very determined. Since it's a task I had started, I had to get to Boston. Because if I don't do Boston, because that is actually the hurdle. Most people are doing 5, but when it gets to Boston, they don't get past it. So I've really worked hard. I've joined some people who were training very hard within the city. And our training involves, because we have a day job, wake up at 5. Actually, my life has changed in that because we train in the morning. We are on the road by 5 a.m. in the morning, and by 7 o'clock, you have done your 15 kilometer or 20 kilometer, and then you come up with a regime that gives you a certain number of mileage per week. I was quite lucky to have people surrounding me or training with me who have experience. And so, let me say I was coached. But it was actually hard work, because getting to a mileage of about 80, 90 kilometers per week, then it means that you have to actually be running about 4-5 days every week to be able to get this.
James, for you, I'm just looking at your record. It took you about, just by looking from Chicago, which is in October, to Berlin 2015, that was just short of 2 years to get your 6 stars.
Right.
If you were to count, 24 months, a 24-month period. But you did Chicago and New York. Those are 2 marathons that are close to each other. That's just about 3 weeks apart, and that was in 2013.
Right.
How do you go through this and the recovery protocols, given that the conditions in Chicago and New York, and knowing it's a northern hemisphere, it gets colder with time?
Right. Yes, that's an interesting question. For starters, we are recreational runners, so we don't put out the all training regime that you can associate with elites who have to run a few races a year. For us, we run for fun, mostly. That's the most important thing. And when we go outside the country to run, we spend a lot of money for the tickets and accommodation. So sometimes we have this, if you have to travel to, for example, the United States, it's a long way. And why not? So if you're there already, so that's how I ended up running back-to-back Chicago Marathon and New York. It was really a tall order, because definitely your body needs to recover. But because we are not chasing time, and we're out to have fun, I look at it as sports tourism. Yes, it's hard, but if you put some limited, a certain amount of, you log in a certain amount of kilometers a week, as you were saying, probably not 100, it's possible. It's possible to run marathons. Some people have run marathons every week. This is because they're not running for money, and they're not going for these crazy times that Kenyans are associated with, sub 2 hours, 10 minutes. Yeah.
Jackson, I want to come back to you. Yeah. There's one marathoner who's known as Yuki Kawauchi. This is a man who's done, I think, 80 marathons in a very short time. He'll be running every so often, and he's got a day job in Japan, but he's an elite runner by, looking at what he did. He won the Boston Marathon this year in atrocious conditions. Correct. Jackson, you are there and you finished that race.
Correct.
Briefly tell us how you went through that, the heavy rain and the chilly weather in Boston.
Yeah, I think Boston, among the majors, Boston is one of the races that I'll never forget. Because number one, this is one of the races that I had really trained for, and I had gotten so close to doing sub 3 hours, and I really wanted it because my previous marathon, which was New York Marathon, I had done 3 hours and 1 minute. So I needed to kill this marathon. And getting to Boston, the weather gets just crazy. In fact, the previous day they had said that we need to keep watching this weather because they were ready to cancel the marathon. Just to give a brief story of what happened is that it started okay. It was very cold. I think the temperatures was under 4 degrees, but it wasn't raining in the morning. But as soon as we got started, the rain started. It was windy, it was raining, it was cold. In fact, by the 3rd kilometer, my inner sole came off. And I thought my shoe was actually getting torn.
So was it blistering like?
No, I decided, let me just stop. Let me check, because if the shoe is getting torn, then I'm not sure I'm going to complete this race. So I removed it. Then by 5th kilometer, the other one came off.
So I had to stop. No insoles?
I ran without insoles. But lucky enough, I was able to run without them. I had heavy socks. But that was not even the problem. The problem was the cold, because the way I do marathons is such that towards the end of it, I will stop, I'll have the Kenyan flag, I will remove
Where do you carry it?
I carry it on, I will have a belt.
Aha.
Yes, a waist belt. So I will stop and remove the
flag.
Yeah, and that is the same place I put my gels. But this time, all my hands were frozen.
Wow.
I could not remove my flag, which is something that I do very fast. I could not remove it. And again, when you stop, your temperatures go down. So you had better keep running.
Wow.
But one thing I'll never stop to what is when I finished and I got my medal, I got so cold. I was.
Were you hospitalized?
I wasn't hospitalized, but I was put on a wheelchair and wheeled to the medical tent. Actually, let me just say everybody was just
everybody was there.
Yes.
All right, Jackson, let me just cut it short because the story can go on. James, there's an event which is known as the Ethiopian Great Run, the Great Run in Ethiopia.
Yes.
And 45,000 runners in Addis Ababa. How do we get Kenyans running? Because it's one of the biggest challenges. Everyday people make more everyday champions.
Home, that's quite an interesting question you posed, and this is what we're trying to do, just to see the recreational running growing in Kenya. When we run outside Kenya, you get amazed at how Kenyans are recognized because of our elites, the great ambassadors we have, and how people want to associate with us. And it's sometimes a pity when we come back here, we don't have major races in the country, just even the biggest we have is probably the Untitled Marathon, and unfortunately this year it was quite a bit of a mess, but this is how we want to see recreational running growing, having more clubs. We can start there, running clubs, this helps. You posed a question about training. So when you're training alone, it's a bit difficult, but when you're in a club, a running club, you get along others who can support you. And yes, these Ethiopians, our neighbors, are doing it much better than us, and it will be interesting to see if we can do something to that effect. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, James. Thank you very much, Jackson. Everyday champions. You can see their medals. 6-star generals. That's what the World Marathon Majors calls them. I mean, you can actually show off these medals. There are only 3 in the country. 2 of them are in the studio at the moment. So the first one, the third one, the second one was won by Edna Kiplagat.
There are 14 in Africa.
Yes. And the 4th one just might be coming in February. So thank you very much, gentlemen. And yeah, everyday champions, you can be one too. Over to you, Victor.
And I definitely have one. I think I'm going to pick up running. And this time not to run away from neighborhood dogs, but literally to run, just like these 2 gentlemen. Everyday champions. Like, I want a medal. I want my daughter to look at me and be like, wow, Daddy is awesome. That's what I want. That's what I want. I want to run for my health, but also just to inspire my family. It's awesome.